everybody in world history. This is our second part, 11.2, in the World War I, the Great War unit. So 11.1 was the causes of World War I, and we went through the causes. We talked about mania, militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and then that little letter A, the short-term cause of the war, the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand. Now we're going to turn our attention to talking about who the two teams were fighting in this war and what their differences were, etc. Now, before you go any further with this, take a moment to push pause, open up another tab, and search World War I, which countries fought. It's a short 3-minute review on mojo.com that will give you a review of who fought on which side, why certain countries chose certain allies, etc. So just go ahead and push pause here, go find that, watch that quick review, then come back. Seriously. Go watch the video. Now. Okay, so our allied powers. So you've got on your outline a space where you could create a chart where on one side you would have the allied powers, also known as the Triple Entente. And when you could just make a short list there, Russia, France, Great Britain, those are the original members of the Triple Entente. Italy will join in 1915. The United States will join in 1917. And very interestingly, you notice that Japan is involved with this. Now, they don't really get a lot of attention, nor do they get a lot of props for being involved, and that will be something we talk about later. But that's one of the teams, the Allied powers. Now let's talk about what their strengths were. Why should they be the ones to win the Great War? Well, for the most part, 3 of these nations, England, France, and Germany, or excuse me, England, France, and Russia, are considered powerhouse nations. I mean, they're 3 of the biggest, most important countries in Europe, which makes them 3 of the biggest, most important countries in the world. The only powerhouse on the Central Powers side is Germany. So it's kind of like, you know, if we were picking players, they've got LeBron, Steph Curry, and Kobe, and all Germany has is Jordan. Jordan's pretty good, but is he better than Steph, Kobe, and LeBron? Second, all 3 of these nations have great industrial capacity. They can make all the stuff you need to go fight wars, and they're going to need a lot of it. These are big industrial nations, so they've got the power to support one of those long-term causes. Which long-term cause do you think great industrial capacity can support the best? Well, that would be militarism, making all the things to support the military. They surround Germany. Okay, I mean, think about it. When you look at a map, and we talk about these countries real quick, you see France, Great Britain, and Russia in green. Notice they surround Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it's always easiest to fight your enemy if you can keep them surrounded. U.S. is going to be eventually involved, and eventually it's going to join the Allies. But until they do, they actually support the Allies with many things like food, military supplies, etc. We're going to talk about that process, about how the U.S. slowly gets involved in the war. But even before they got involved by declaring war on Germany, they were still somewhat involved supporting the English and the French. And last but not least, the one huge military advantage that the Allies had was the British Navy. We've been talking about the British Navy for a long time. Very powerful. Hail Britannia. Britannia rules the seas. The reason they have an empire that the sun never sets on is because they have a huge and powerful navy. It's everywhere. And basically, it can cut off supplies to Germany. Germany's going to slowly starve, whether it's starving for food or starving for the materials it needs to make military weapons, etc. And so those are your strengths, and they're pretty good strengths. I mean, you've got big, powerful nations with big, powerful industries in the right place, fighting together. Okay, the other side of the coin here is your triple alliance, also known as the Central Powers. Okay, so of course the most important one here is Germany, but we would also add Austria-Hungary. Remember, they're the ones who got this whole thing started. And Archduke Francis Ferdinand from Austria was assassinated by a Serbian. Eventually, they're going to be joined by the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, the Turkish Empire, and eventually, even further later on than that, the Bulgarians. But the Bulgarians brought so little to the table that we don't really even talk about them. Notice they didn't even make the page. And there's really only one reason why the Ottomans make it. Now, why did the Ottomans join the Central Powers? Well, for the most part, they were already seen as kind of an outcast by many of the European nations. And so they felt like maybe siding with Germany might give them an opportunity when Germany won for them to make some gains in the Balkans. All right, what were the advantages of the Central Powers? Well, they share borders. So whereas one advantage of the Triple Entente was they surrounded the Central Powers, well, at least you share borders with your buddy there, which makes it easier for you to share weapons, share armies, share food, etc. Countries within the Central Powers are autocratic and ruled with absolute power, like Kaiser Wilhelm, who was an extremely powerful emperor. Well, that means that it's easier for you to get what you want from your country. When you want soldiers, you want money. In democracies, you got to vote for those things. People have to get along. And we're going to see what happens to Russia because their government is going to fall apart during this war. But the Central Powers, both Austria-Hungary and Germany, and to a pretty much a similar extent, the Ottomans, they had very powerful rulers who could force their people to do what they wanted. We'll see this again in World War II in Germany. Okay, number 3, German militarism. The best army, easily. The best trained, largest numbers. Well, the Russians had the largest numbers, but that's kind of like saying the Everglades has lots of land nobody wants to live there. Yeah, you can go live in a swamp with the gators and the snakes, but nobody wants to. So yeah, the Russians had a big army. It wasn't very good. But the Germans had a really big army, a really well-trained army, and a very well-equipped army. Industrialization. In addition, they had a new naval technology which helped them to offset one of the major alliance strengths, which was the British Navy. The Germans had U-boats, what we call today submarines. And we'll talk in the next unit, 11.3, about how submarines changed war. And the Germans had them. And because they had them, they could cut off Russia from France and Britain. So you couldn't get there through the north because of British or German submarines in the North Sea. And you couldn't get there through the south because the Turks controlled Constantinople. Remember this city right here, the toll booth that we've talked about going back to even to the Roman Empire? Well, the Turks controlled this toll booth right here. So the British and the French could not supply Russia this way because of German submarines, and they couldn't supply Russia this way because they couldn't get through the toll booth. And so Russia is going to slowly starve and wither on the vine. And as you're going to see, that makes a big difference. So what you should do here is take this map, push pause, and in your reflection brainstorm, just do a quick sketch. Don't make it look perfect. Just enough to recognize you've got 2 main allies on the west, 1 main ally in the east. You've got Central Powers in between. You've got water that they want to get through Constantinople, but they can't through the Turks. You might add in Italy, the boot kicking the ball. Just remember that they do join in 1915. And then you'd give it a little color key just so you recognize which are the Allied and which are the Central Powers. Okay, that was a real short, quick, easy, essential question. Go ahead and do your Allied versus Central Powers limerick at the bottom of the page as a way to help remind you and refresh you about what the teams were and what their powers were.